Hi, I'm Andre Alfonso, and welcome to the series, The Indian in Me, where I interview people about their stories and about their identity. So, underneath, you're going to see a subscribe button. Please subscribe to this and leave a comment because we would like to hear your stories too. And if you visit our webpage, theindianinme.com, and the link is also in the notes below, please share your story with us as well.
Now, in this episode, I am so looking forward to interviewing Dr. Richard Johnson. Now, let me tell you, Richard's always felt like an older brother to me. And I recall with so much fondness and affection Richard reading me stories when I was not yet old enough to read. But back to Richard. Richard was born in India in a place called Gaya. Now, that's the place where Siddhartha Gautama, or Buddha, attained enlightenment underneath the Bodhi tree. It was kind of interesting because I think I always look at Richard Johnson as being one of the most enlightened people I know. So maybe there's some wash over from that. Well, Richard left there and grew up in Calcutta and now living in Melbourne, Australia, his home since 1969, which he came to as a mere 23-year-old lad. But before coming here, he completed his secondary schooling in schools run by Christian brothers in Kurseong and Darjeeling in the Himalayas. And now, having gone to Gathols myself, it's something we hold in common. And I still, to this day, have carved in my brain the image of a Mount Kanchenjunga looking into our classroom. It's something that will never leave me. But back to Richard. Now, Richard can possibly go by many labels, and I'm sure we're going to find out some of those today. But one of those is academic. Now, he started his journey with his initial tertiary studies in Calcutta, having completed 2 degrees, then moving to Australia, and then he continued his academic career in Melbourne. He completed another 4 tertiary qualifications. Wow, 6 tertiary qualifications. I think about it, knowing a little bit of Richard's story of 6 degrees of vindication. His seventh qualification is his PhD, hence Dr. Richard Johnson. And that's ensured he's reached the summit of academia. And of course, because of his nature, his research is widely published, the bulk of which has interestingly been in the last 5 years, I've discovered. Now, his focus has been on education, and one of his many awards he has received for his professional work was the Deakin University Vice Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Teaching. I know Richard. Without even being in a class, I know he would be an outstanding teacher. And I wish I could have been in one of Richard's classes when I went to uni compared to some of the bozos I had that claimed they could teach. Oh, goodness me. However, we're here today to find out about Richard the man, not Richard the academic. However, I'm sure Richard's identity was forged, I guess, in his experiences in academia. A world made up of old white men when he first came here. We'll find out soon enough. What we're interested in is Richard's stories. He is a master storyteller. And perhaps I'm biased because it takes me back to him reading to me as a child. Well, welcome, Richard, to The Indian in Me.
Thank you, Andre. Well, that was quite an introduction. Thank you very much.
Very impressive. But let's talk about you, the man, because that's what I'm interested in finding out about, Richard. So, what are your earliest memories, Richard? I would love to hear them.
My earliest memories were obviously in India. I spent the first 23 years of my life, as you said, in India. And my earliest memories were about, I had just a wonderful early memory period with wonderful parents. I don't have any, hang-ups or, problems with mother or father or grandmother and grandfather. Just a wonderful journey through family, just wonderful. That's the early one. And then, of course, as you said, I went to boarding school, and there was a lot of fear in my memories there, and the fear blocked my learning. And then in the last 2 years, it eased, the fear eased, my learning improved a bit, and I'm actually a late developer in my learning, in my academic career, as you called it. That was much later in my development. But fear. So to these so I'm a believer in not having secrets and trying to eliminate fears, eliminate those blockages, because fear is a serious blockage, isn't it? And in school, in boarding school, as you know, it was all about sport and rough and tough, and boys' school, and there was fear. That fear factor was just so dominant in my memory, and these Irish Christian brothers marching along, look, they were doing the best they could. Actually, they did they did exceptionally well by me. I wouldn't be a teacher if it wasn't for Brother Morrow, who planted the seed of teaching, and the most unlikely person, who'd beat the children up at the drop of a hat. But he told me, Johnson, if you want to do teaching, and I was in year 10, the equivalent. If you want to do year 11, actually, if you want to do teaching, we'll pay for you. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I sleepless night after that, and I couldn't, because academically I wasn't measuring up to being made that offer. So he saw something there. So having said a bit about the earliest memories, I don't know, but it's very much a good early childhood in India, and very, very pleasant memories.
Any specifics, Richard, of where you were living and what was happening around you? Like if you go back to your, to the filing cabinet, what were the first glimmers of memory for you?
Yeah, the first glimmers of memory that I can make some sense of to share with you would be my experience in a place called Muzaffarpur. So my father was in Shell Oil Company, transferred from place to place. This is no highfalutin job or anything like that, just very, And so in India, the measure was, did he own a car? No, he didn't own a car. He rode a push bike. That tells you where. So anyhow, and we were in Muzaffarpur. Now, the first thing was to try and get me into Bethall's, the boarding school. But it was something between not being able to, but that ability had a lot to do with not being able to afford to. So I went to a Hindi school, again run by Catholic Swiss nuns, Montessori style. I went to that school, and that had a hell of an effect on me, because in the Indian in me, it got me in touch with that Indian side of me. So I used to play with the chokras outside, and my mother and father didn't quite like that, but I used to. They were my friends. And then in class, my Hindi improved to the extent where a lot of Anglo-Indian students in those days at Bethall's carried a badge of success of not being good at Hindi, whereas I was very good at Hindi because of this year and a half, 2 years in Muzaffarpur. And that was a very important memory for me, and being able to play with these guys on the street and really almost admire the freedom that they had. I mean, they could play bare feet without any shoes, whereas my soft little feet needed to be protected. And I used to say, wow, wouldn't it be great? And So those are my.
Okay, fantastic. So when you mentioned before about fear being a big part of your life, what was the, if I can ask,
Mm.
what was the source of that fear for you in Gathal's?
The source of the fear was not making it, not being good enough. So the 2 years in this Hindi, largely Hindi school, and not in that curriculum, set me back a little bit. However, the fear was even more than that. The fear was not getting things right. And actually, I would say that a lot of the philosophy of education at that time was fear driven. So a lot of the disciplining was fear driven for everyone, not just for me.
Mm.
And a lot of students who I'm in touch with now, currently from Godol's, from all those years back, they can relate to the fear issue. And then you've got these white bully types, and serious as all hell, with walking around with straps. And I mean, of course you'd be fearful, Well, I think
Okay.
you'd be,
Wow.
yeah.
So interesting what you said about Brother Morrow. So, and I know you don't know for sure, but if you could, have Brother Morrow sitting next to you right now and said, "What did you see in me that led me to teaching Brother Morrow?" What do you think he might say?
Yeah, I can tell you what he'd say, because he saw me. See, our teacher running the drama. So the school concert was a big thing, not as big as the sports, but it was very big. And the teacher fell ill, and they said, "Oh, we can't have a concert." And I talked to Mohan Shivdashani, a friend of mine, and I said, "Look, we can do this." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We'll run this. We can have rehearsals. We know it. We can do it." So we went and saw the brother that evening, and we said, "We'll do it." And Morrow came to watch because he wanted to. He let us go once, and then the next rehearsal he was there right at the back with his arms folded, the red face, arms folded, angry look. And he watched all of it. And he saw, I think he saw, and now I'm able to think back, and I think he saw communication, the ability to get along with the whole team of actors and communicate with them, because there was a lot of anger and fight in that boarding school type. And I was able to talk to these people and communicate with them, and kind of bring out stuff in them. So I think that was what he saw.
Okay, fantastic. So when you think back to your life in India, Richard, is there a story that you kind of hold closest to your heart, a special story of an incident or something like that? And if there is, it'd be interesting to hear some treasured memory of life in India that you hold.
I don't know. See, there are lots of little stories, that I hold about sadhus and how they foretold the future and this kind of thing. But at the age of about, well, I think it was 16, 17. So I may have just finished school. It was my last year. There was a lovely a servant that we had, a servant boy, we used to call them. And he was a young man, and I got along really well with him. And so I'm now at holiday time back in Calcutta. We went to the boarding school up in the hills for 9 months and 3 months at home in Calcutta. So this is the 3-month time. And I got talking to him. We were the only two in the house, and we were talking and so on. He's standing there and talking, and I'm sitting at the table. So I told him, I said, "Sit down." And he sat with me at the table, and we talked. And my mother came in and saw him, and thank God she didn't react immediately, but she got me aside as soon as she could and said, "Richard, don't do that again." And I said, "Don't do what?" And she said, "Have a servant sitting with you at the table." And I said, "But what's wrong with him?" There was a chair there, and I couldn't have him stand and talk down, and me, talk to him in that up-down kind of level. And she said, "Look, maybe wait till you are out on your own and you can do that. But in this house, please, you can't communicate with the servants like that." And that was very significant for me, because I thought that was it opened the door to think about other relationships, and it just seems so wrong, so unfair, so yeah, and that has that I remember that clearly.
When you say it opened the door, mate,
Yeah.
is there any more there that kind of it
Well,
forged in terms of you, the
the way
person you
the way we communicate with people, I've done. See, then from Australia, I've done a lot of work in India, in Nepal, especially in Nepal, and my relationship with the it was interesting. I'd ask people in the hotel that and remember I was there in Nepal for a year. I was working at the university there on a scholarship for a year, and that was a Rotary scholarship. And anyhow, so I asked. I shouldn't name him here, but I asked my friend from Kathmandu, who I was in school with. Okay, so this is 20 years later, and I told him, I said, "Come over. I'm here in Kathmandu. Let's have a drink." And he loves the bottle, so he comes, meets me and we're on the second floor, and we go to the lift to go down to have our drink. And one of the guys working there came into the lift, and this friend of mine, good friend of mine, said, "Hang on, I'm sorry, I won't go with him in the lift." He tells me. So he told him, "Get out of the lift," in that kind of way. And I said, why are you doing this? And he said, "Richard, I know you've got all these highfalutin ideas from Australia, but here you're in my country, you're in Nepal. This guy is not coming in the lift, he's out." And this guy says, "Oh, look, sorry, sir, don't worry." He said, I'll be going out. That was just, and then I go out and have a drink with him, this friend of mine, and I couldn't even talk to him about it, because it was so deep there.
Yeah. I might come back. I might come back to that story if later on, if that's all right, because it may lend itself to life in Australia later on. It just seems that there's a connection, perhaps, maybe. I'm not sure. So what has, you've been in Australia, so you came to Australia as a 23-year-old. You spent most of your life here, but what has stuck with you culturally from the Indian in you?
So when I came to Australia, I realized that I was Indian, because the people would see me as an Indian. And remember, in those early days, 69, there weren't a lot of Indians. The latest census says that the Indians are the third largest, like as of yesterday. The finding is in the 2021 census, the Indian population here in Australia are the third largest migrants, obviously behind British. But at that time, not at all. But, and there was a lot of talk about color, for example, and the fact that I was Indian, and, so the kind of the focus was on the Indian. And actually, I didn't know much about India. I mean, I couldn't quote Indian, I couldn't quote Tagore. I didn't know who Jiddu Krishnamurti was. And I then did a degree at Melbourne Uni on Indian studies. And it was just fabulous. And it just opened so much up for me. And I there was just a lot happened. And I carried that through to another master's that I did a master's degree in arts in Melbourne Uni. And I looked at the Indian influence in Australia. And that was from that interest, So there was suddenly an awareness of the gap of what I didn't know, of the lack of the Indian in my Anglo-Indian heritage.
So what's in terms of identity then, coming to Australia and being seen as an Indian, was that a bit of an identity kind of issue with you?
Yes. And it got me thinking even more about the them and us issues that exist here in Australia, but they also exist in India. And you know, I'm fully aware that India is not without racism. India is ridden with class, as I've said, about my friend in Nepal, and all that. They're ridden with all those differences. You come to Australia, and here too, there are those differences.
So what were some of the early challenges you faced? The things, you talk about fear in Goethals. Was there fear when you came here or not really?
No, actually, so I'm getting rid of this fear factor in me quite actively, and so the reason why I was in secondary school, and my qualifications weren't quite. They didn't know much about accepting in those days my Indian qualifications. They asked me to do a master's degree. I thought that was most unfair, but I enrolled and I did it, and I loved it. And then I was a secondary teacher doing a master's degree. No, and then yes, secondary teacher doing a master's degree. And did I ever think of doing a doctorate? Not at all. But then I saw people around with doctorates, and I thought, my God, I can do this, and in fact, it's almost a proving to yourself that you can do, but to myself, that I could do it. That was a bit of a challenge too. And of course, I did it. So it's this coming out of the fog of fear that was right through. But, one of the things about Australia, it was a very enabling place. So, I enjoyed the Whitlam funding era. So the reason why my students now look at my degrees and say, Richard, this must have cost you a fortune. And I tell them it didn't, because it was totally Whitlam subsidized. And all I used to pay was a union fee each year. This is just brilliant opportunity. So I had this opportunity that I took, So after my 4 years full-time degree, 4 years full-time study in India, I did 23 years of part-time study in Australia in a row, 23 years study at university level. And I was very lucky, in all of that. And I loved it and enjoyed it, and went back to work in that area.
So as you think back over your academic career and the time you came to Australia and all that you've done, which is amazing achievement, were there any kind of lightning bolt moments or moments of enlightenment along the way? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because often we look back in our lives and go, wow, just like Brother Morrow was a lightning bolt moment for you, right? Were there any in Australia that you can think of that you would like to share?
Oh, there are certainly moments like that where you feel I can do it. And in teaching, I've always loved teaching. And even in my university career, I stayed at that level of senior lecturer for a long time, because that was the space where I could teach, research, and publish, and all not dominated by research or not dominated by teaching. I was never only teaching. I was always researching and always writing. So and I liked that combination. So that was very significant for me, and that's why I dragged a bit of longevity in that academic career, because I didn't have the knife to my throat to earn lots of money, bring in huge funds, as some of the professors and so on have to do. I could still enjoy my teaching, and research and publication.
Okay.
Then I could get into areas like, I'm fascinated by learning. and how learning takes place. So I've done a lot of reading in neuroscience and, and how that translates to learning in the classroom and how that translates to how I learned in Gutholz and why things were. So I'm interested in explaining my Gutholz experience. I'm interested in explaining, like I've taken students to Nepal, like I'm talking about groups of students to Nepal to teach as in their teaching practice, teacher training students. And I've taken a group to Mumbai, in fact, that when the bombing occurred, I had 16 students in Mumbai when the bombing occurred.
Wow.
Yeah. And you see, I was doing that because we were learning together. We were questioning rote, for example. So rather than say, there's such a predominance of rote here, rote learning. See, let's examine rote. Why is it? And what can we do to actually look at how students learn through memory? So I've got very interested in this issue of memory in learning, and not just rote learning, but rote is only a small part of memory. In fact, rote is the worst way to learn to enhance memory. But that's in itself a discovery. Yeah. So there's been a lot of this stuff happening. And intercultural education, we suck money out of our international students here in Australia. We don't try and understand them. So when I wrote about the monsoon wedding phenomena in teacher education, in intercultural education, the monsoon wedding phenomena, the purpose of that paper was to point out that we don't understand our international students. Most Australian academics think, oh, these students have got a lot of money. Not the ones that come to Australia. They are the children of what you'd call middle class Indian, the children of jewelers, middle kind of small business people. Because the top people that a lot of our academics think that the Indians are, they don't come to Australia. They go to ivory tower universities in America and in England. Those are the facts. We need to understand who our students are. I mean, that's basic in teaching,
Yep. Interesting. Fascinating. Okay, coming back to you, my friend.
Yeah.
What is your identity today? If you had to look at yourself, how would you describe your identity here in 2022? Richard?
Yeah, I'm Australian, and I was born in India, and I came to Australia, and I've loved living in Australia and reaping and all the benefits of this wonderful place. And I wouldn't rather be anywhere else, really. So I love it. I've got my football team, and I take part in all those wonderful. The part of that movement was when I stopped barracking for India and I started barracking for Australia in the cricket. Now, that was a light bulb moment there. So I barracked for Australia. I never want Indians to make a fool of themselves. But I certainly don't have them as my number one team.
Do you remember that moment? Do you remember that moment when you actually realized that you were now barracking?
Yeah, that time, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so as you kind of reflect on this amazing life that you've led, and we've only touched on it, we've only scratched the surface. What are the hard lessons you had to learn, or maybe even keep learning, Richard?
Well, look, I mean, I have to make a point about the Indian in me and say that one of the identifying features, I think, in myself is this kind of interest in spirituality that I've got in my DNA. So I'm quite Buddhist in my way of thinking. So, for example, if you ask me, what do you mean by that? Buddhist, because Buddhism is very popular. But I'll tell you what I mean. So the Buddhist methodology is before you go outside, go inside. So whatever you're doing, go inside first and and examine yourself, and what do you think about that? So identity, go inside, have a little look at yourself. Now, the best way to go inside, to me, there's one way, and that is meditation. So I'm a strong believer in meditation. So my light bulb moment in my life has been discovering the importance of meditation. Now, you might say, and I do meditation just about every day, and you might think I'm really good at meditation, because I do it every day, and I'm kind of talking about it. But I've got to tell you, if you asked me 10 points, Richard, give yourself a mark out for meditation. Now, anyone who knows about meditation will say, oh my God, don't do that. You should not do this. Let me do it. I'll give myself 5 out of 10. I've got so much to learn, I mean, and this is just, it's exciting almost, the amount I've got to learn about meditation. And I'll address that.
Mm.
I don't know how far I'll get, but I will address it. I am addressing it, and it's an ongoing thing. I'm a work in progress. So it's that DNA of spirituality. I love Buddhism, Hinduism. I'm a Catholic, and I respect my learnings in Catholicism. My grandfather was an absolute devotee of Francis of Assisi, and I love my grandfather, and I can now appreciate what he saw in Francis of Assisi. So
okay, so I'm just trying to decipher that. So the hard lesson is really looking inside yourself first, as opposed to looking outside, and that's a lesson you keep relearning. Is that kind of what you're saying?
yes, that's
amazing
methodology.
So how long have you been on this journey of meditation, if I can ask?
It's really, it's almost, I was going to say it's hard to say because, see, I've done courses in pranic healing, which has got a lot to do with meditation too. I don't know when it started, some time ago, Andre. And it's just got kind of stronger, if I could say that. So I've got a lot to learn. I do yoga, but I've got so much to learn. I mean, just in yoga itself, I've just hardly scratched the surface, and when people say, oh, you seem to know, I just get embarrassed because I don't. There's just so much to learn.
Have you ever considered teaching?
Teaching
meditation?
No, not. I don't mind being in a group and talking about it, helping people to understand my understanding of it, to share my understanding of it. But I'm not at the level of actually teaching it. Now I can hear another voice saying rubbish. Of course, no, I'm really not.
That's my voice, mate, saying rubbish.
Yeah, but I would say no. I know I'm not at the stage of being able to say that. I think this is the thing about teaching. You've really got to. You can't fake it. Well, we do often, and I have faked it. I have to tell you, in order to get through and get by. But the students would come into my office sometimes and say, wow, Richard, look at your library. And I'd say, I haven't read most of those books. I haven't really read every book in this library. And I shouldn't admit to that.
Okay, I shouldn't. And if I can just push a little bit, you're an amazing teacher. I've always, you grab an audience, even if it's just you and me having a phone conversation or having a samosa in a food court. You have this amazing ability to engage the other person, which is, I think, your teaching talent, if you so call it. It's not about the knowledge you have. So there's a whole lot of people, maybe like me, who might be 1s or 2s on the journey of meditation and mindfulness. 5's not bad. Not all of us can have, the Buddha as our teacher. Anyway, I'll just put that out to you because I think you'd be amazing. It's having, because I run a meditation business, I just think you have so much of the I don't know, um, innate talent to be amazing and to engage audiences just of your style. Okay. So what's one legacy you think you want to leave behind for future generations, Richard?
Yeah, I don't really see when I go to New Zealand, I'd love to be able to engage with my grandsons. I don't think about leaving them a message or a legacy, but my legacy I'd like to leave with them is I engaged with them and I shared with them, and they're actually teaching me a lot, even in the intellectual sense, you know, one's 23, one's 21. Oh, they're just fabulous. So what do I want to leave them? I don't want to leave them a legacy of anything, really. I just want to be able to say, I had an honest life and I shared whatever I had, or put it on the table, for anyone who wants to take. I sometimes feel I don't know, I'd hate to see myself as an advice giver or, to think that I'm going to leave something real, legacy or something. I don't reckon I will,
Okay.
I mean, and I know that people, I've actually had experience of knowing someone and them passing and people just forget them. It's just an amazing forgetting. Yeah.
So going back to the story of the servant in the chair and your mum having a word with you, and then again the incident in Kathmandu with your old school friend. Those are pretty powerful stories in terms of you as a person. How's that played out to you today, you think? As that sort of sensibility, how does that show up now in your life?
Well, I don't know. I'd like to think that, in communicating with people, I'd communicate with everyone, I'd love to think that when I go and see my sister in aged care currently, I passed by so many people who are working there who are just doing a wonderful job, and most of them are Indians, Thai or Nepali. And I take it upon myself to honestly convey to them my thanks, because of their wonderful work. And they are just doing amazing stuff. So I think just being open and honest it's actually quite simple, and being able to communicate with everyone, not being judgmental, God.
So how do you deal with it when you see others around you? Because we live in this world which is very judgmental and very divisive. How do you kind of deal with that in today's world when you see it around you? Just curiosity.
I've seen that. I've seen that even dealt out to me. But fortunately, there's so many alternatives, and you look at ways of changing that by doing something rather than changing it by confronting. Because confronting it doesn't change it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you're one of the initiators of this collaboration called the Indian in Me.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that. What was the inspiration for that? What captured your imagination that kind of set this ship on at sail?
There's been this intuition about this addressing silence. And then you see, in academia, we talk a lot about collaboration and we don't really do it properly, I believe, anyway. Even in writing papers and so on, I'm not sure that's really. So what I've tried to do is get together a group that have people who've got outstanding skills in different areas. So, my first person I took my idea to was Nigel. because I know nothing about filmmaking or videos. And so Nigel just thinks in images and, and all that kind of way. And I took that to him. And then, I don't think in a business sense. I don't think in a business sense. And how to set a business up, how to apply and get funding. And we've got an outstanding group of people, and I think this is linking back to another question you asked before. See, if we in our group can actually show that we want to enable growth, we want Anglo-Indians to come and be part of the group, and we will have, and we will endeavor to have, collaborative, kind of positive environments where those people will feel and be promoted, rather than there'll be no, dare I say, backstabbing, or, we're working together to do this research, to do this storytelling, story capturing, relating to. So that is such a magnificent challenge for me, to be in a group, and then not to then, I don't feel as if I'm the leader of the group. Not at all. We've been together, even this short time, long enough to know that there's no one person kind of, that we're a group, and we've got some fabulous skills. And, your fabulous interview with Bernie just showed, just a person with some exceptional skills, we are just so privileged to have in our group. And what we want to do is to get some young minds in there too. And dare I say, we've got people who can do some outstanding mentoring and working with young people. And I'm not talking about an up and down relationship. I'm talking about a sharing relationship. So we've still got a way to go in growing.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for this.
So just to wrap it up, thank you again. And thanks for watching, everyone. So once again, please click on the subscribe button and leave a comment. We would love to hear your stories as well. Yeah. So please share them on our webpage, theindianinme.com. That's one word, theindianinme.com. The link is below. And I will have some more interviews to share, and I hope you can join us again. So I'm Andre Alfonso, and thanks for watching this interview series, The Indian in Me. See you next time.